Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is July 13th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, today I'm going to do a few map updates and just going to cover some news. So, let's get to it. Now, the first thing I want to mention and cover is actually the first slide is Bakhmut. So, again, for the Ukrainians, advancing here is slow. It's not as fast as any of us would have wanted, but they're still getting some ground little by little every single day. The fights are intense and difficult for the Ukrainians because the Russians are constantly pushing reserves to fill up the gaps in their defenses that they have taken over when the Ukrainian army retreated back to where they started from a month ago here. So it makes the job extremely difficult for the Ukrainians because truly the mobilization that started in Russia in September that was announced by Putin never ever ended. And so you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of mobilized soldiers that are constantly being pushed to the front line to fill up these gaps. And this is one of the reasons why we've been seeing a massive influx as well of complaints from regular Russian soldiers saying that they don't have the right equipment, they're not being supported, and things are pretty much terrible for them. And also cover some other pretty grim news for the Russian soldiers in one of my last slides. So the good news for the Ukrainian army is that in Berhivka and in Klishivka, they're advancing rather slowly. So, every single week it could be a couple hundred meters, but the Ukrainians essentially now hold the heights of Klishivka, and that's been the case for about a week or so. But you can see that they've had a small little breakthrough at the very top of this height. And so the Russians, despite their massive losses, they continue pushing within Klishivka to reinforce their defensive positions. So I think that this summer, the focus that we've seen, the shift from the Ukrainian army has been more towards hitting now the Russian ammunition depots, logistical supply lines, really weakening the rear of Russia. That way, they can, within a few months, be able to really have massive breakthroughs. It doesn't matter where. It could be in Bakhmut, it could be in Donetsk, it could be in Zaporizhzhia, in Luhansk, but it's really weakening all of their rear positions, their supply lines, and then finding a weak spot. So for now, I think we should be expecting for the next few weeks some small little breakthroughs, small advancements, but nothing too crazy. Now, in terms of Robotine, in the middle of Zaporizhzhia, the Ukrainians have gained a better position. It's been visually confirmed that northeast of Robotine, which is a very important town to take for the Ukrainians. It's one of the largest first towns in that kind of first line of defense that the Russians built. So if the Ukrainians take it, it creates them a great staging area for further offensives towards Tokmak, which is one of the main goals, because Tokmak is a major city that the Ukrainians want to take. And I have no doubts that within a few months, Tokmak will be in Ukrainian hands. What makes the job complicated, you guys have already heard about it, you already know, is the amount of mines that the Russians have had time to put in throughout their trenches, the minefields, and the trench works that they've built for the last few months. And it makes the job extremely difficult for the Ukrainians. And again, the Ukrainians don't have air superiority in Zaporizhzhia, or for that matter, anywhere else in Ukraine. They need to be using these few jet fighters that Ukraine has to protect the skies of their own cities in Kiev, Lviv, Kharkiv, to be able to stop, constant Russian missile attacks. So they cannot spare their MiG-29s to fight in Zaporizhzhia. And plus, it would be very, very dangerous for them to be flying around here because, of course, the Russians also have air defense capabilities. So for the Ukrainians, it only means one thing. It's to attack with infantry, with tanks, and it makes them extremely vulnerable, especially because Zaporizhzhia, you guys know the terrain is extremely open. There's very few forests. There's no real natural cover or like rivers or things like that, like heights in Zaporizhzhia to be able to have some sort of advantage or just natural cover. So for the Ukrainians, if you're on the offensive, it makes the job extremely complicated and deadly. And of course, the Ukrainian army has been getting some losses, as you guys have seen the last few weeks. Some Leopard 2s, some Bradleys were lost. But the Ukrainian spirit remains, and it will remain strong until the very end. So I have no doubt that the Ukrainians, by weakening the Russian logistics, are going to be able to eventually, probably within the fall time, to be pushing the Russians further and further with greater speed as they lose their defensive capabilities. And as I mentioned, the Ukrainians, of course, are hitting the logistical supply lines. And if we take a look on the map in Polohe, there was a video that came out today of a few Russian Ural trucks that were hit by Ukrainian artillery. And I believe it was HIMARS systems. So the Russians, of course, depend on these fuel trucks to be able to fuel their tanks, their APCs that often try to go on the counteroffensive as soon as the Ukrainians gain momentum and gain a good position, whether it be in Pyatekhatke area or in Robotine or in Velika Novosilka in the Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia Oblast. So they need these trucks to be able to refuel their vehicles as well. And what the Ukrainians are doing is extremely smart. It's hitting the rear and really weakening the supply lines. Now, the other thing which would be important again is to hit one of those key bridges that links Crimea to Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. Now, we've seen a few weeks ago the Ukrainian army did hit a bridge over Chonhar, which is around this area, really at the very border between Crimea and Kherson. And I think the Ukrainians continue doing that. I think the Russians might have repaired this bridge by now, and so they can continue, pushing new, fuel trucks, trucks carrying ammunition, and also even their trains to Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. So the Ukrainians need to continuously pound key roads and bridges that the Russians are using because they're extremely fragile. This is an extremely fragile area for the Russians here. And with the summit that happened a few days ago, I think, if I remember correctly, France actually approved sending their version of the Storm Shadow missile, which was the Scalp missile, which has even greater range, and I think possibly could even hit the Kerch Bridge. And so I think that there's no better time than now to use these Storm Shadow missiles and the different variations that Ukraine got to be able to start weakening, whether it be the Kerch Bridge or if it's still kind of a red line for the West. Unfortunately, this is still something that can influence Ukraine. Then let's hit, the bridge over Chonhar or some other key areas that the Russians are using in the very, very rear of their front lines. So I hope that this is going to continue happening and at a much greater rate from the Ukrainian side. So that's pretty much it in terms of the update of the map. Things are moving slowly for the Ukrainians, but steadily. So I'm confident that with the tactics that they've employed the last few days or few weeks, I think it's going to start giving a lot of, it's going to reap a lot of rewards eventually for the Ukraine army as they start weakening the Russian defenses. So that's pretty much it. So now let's go back into the main slides. And this is one of the reasons why the morale within the Russian army is at all-time low. And I think that this is one of the many reasons why I think Russia will not win this war, but also why eventually they'll completely break down. So this is an article that was released today, and it pretty much confirms what, it doesn't surprise, I guess, any of you guys and myself to hear or read these types of reports, but Russian soldiers that need to pay bribes to their commanders to be able to go on vacation or to have a more favorable position, right? Some of these soldiers that were releasing these videos complaining that they were supposed to go to the third line of defense or, a more of a relaxed position, often find themselves being the very front line and having almost zero, weapons or ammunition. And so this article pretty much confirms the testimonials of many families that speak with their soldiers, with their loved ones in the front line, the Russian soldiers, and them complaining that they literally have to pay these bribes. And here I'm going to read a little passage of this article. So a wife, Irina from Vladivostok, says Vladivostok, so this is the very far east of Russia, literally the far east, says that commanders demand 100,000 rubles for leave. Those who are close to the commanders and look to them in one place now can go and leave. Connections and money decide. We have neither. Another wife, Anastasia from Irkutsk, says that in her husband's unit, the demanded bribe is even bigger. Commanders take bribes not just for leave, but to place soldiers in safer rear positions, away from the dangers of the front line. We don't get to pay 100, but 200,000 for the opportunity to leave. My husband paid 2 of his monthly salaries and was at home for a fortnight in May. So, I mean, it's not really surprising. I even heard rumors that back in the Chechen wars, some of these Russian commanders were willingly sending their own soldiers to ambushes because they were being bribed by the Chechen leaders that were telling him, hey, we can pay you, but just send your soldiers to certain death. And they were okay with that. And this type of behavior does not breed victory. It does not breed, a progress or a better future for Russians, right? You can see how literally why we call them orcs, because they have an orc mentality. It's everybody for themselves, and there's no good relationship between soldiers, between commanders. There's no cohesion within the Russian society anymore. They don't know what they're fighting for, and at this point, everybody's for themselves, right? And you have these commanders and other opportunists trying to make money off of the blood of others, which is horrible if you think about it. But that exists in Russia. And yet again, this is a reminder to my viewers why Russia is not going to win this battle and this war is for the behaviors that they have and the lack of morality as well. So the last video is very telling again of the dire situation that the Russians right now are facing, especially in Zaporizhzhia. So this is General Ivan Spartak Popov. So he was the commander of the Southern Military District, so in charge of the Zaporizhzhia line. And apparently he had a meeting with Gerasimov and Shoigu, and he complained that the situation out there was bad. They didn't have any good, efficient counter battery fire against the Ukrainian army. And essentially, things are not looking good for them. And so following this realistic assessment given to Shoigu and Gerasimov, I guess you guys can expect what happened next. So I'm going to read out to you in this Telegram video, or I guess audio message that he released about, what happened. So now this can be said with certainty. I have been removed from command, dismissed from my post. Lieutenant General Lyamin has assumed command of the army. I await my ultimate fate, military fate, changes of receipt of orders for further continuation of my service. I don't think that's going to happen, buddy. I was honest with you from the beginning. I was candid with you. I've closed the distance with everyone, the gladiators of the army. From the soldier to the marshal, in our case, all the way to our General Staff Commander, Major General Medvedev. Because we all perish in the same way, we fight in the same way, everyone is afraid in the same way, and it is painful and tough for everyone in the same way. I never differentiated, absolutely none, between you all, and was always maximally honest from the very first day of my arrival in the army. So I tell you honestly, a difficult situation occurred with the senior leadership when the choice was to either remain silent in a cowardice and to only say what they wanted to hear, or to call a spade a spade. I, in your name and in the names of all our combat friends who perished, had no right to lie and identify all the problematic questions that exist in today's army. Combat work, provisions, call things by their proper names, force attention on the most important tragedy of modern war, the absence of counter-battery warfare, absence of artillery reconnaissance stations, and massive sheep's death of our brethren from the enemy's artillery. So essentially he's confirming that the Ukrainian artillery is extremely efficient, accurate, and it's hitting the right targets, whereas the Russians are not capable of doing that, at least to the same level as the Ukrainian army. I also raised a number of other problems, expressed it at the highest level, candidly and rather brutally. Ah, General Popov, you should have known better. They don't want to hear the truth. Due to this, it appears senior commanders felt a certain threat for me and swiftly, in just one day of light, concocted an order, and ministers of defense removed me from command and got rid of me. See, you're no better than, a Kleenex or a towel. You're just swept away like that, and that's it. That's how it is in Mother Russia. As many regiment and division commanders have said today, the Ukrainian armed forces failed to reach us on the front line, but instead we have been struck from the rear by our own senior commander, Shoigu, treacherously and despicably, defanging the army at the most difficult and tense moment. However, I remain in open communication with all soldiers, sergeants, and officers of the army, absolutely for everyone available 24/7, any problems, household, family, logistical, combat. So, another possible mutiny in the works? Highly possible. I mean, you can see that this commander seems to be respected within the Russian army, and the fact that he remains in communication with many other commanders and other people in higher positions, in leadership positions within the Russian military, is very telling. And I think that this is just the beginning. You're going to have many more of these generals just absolutely tired of seeing this lack of action from the Russian MOD and Shoigu, who's doesn't even have a military background. So he doesn't even know what he's doing, to be very fair with you guys. So he's in constant communication. Any problems whatsoever, we continue our work in our group. I am always accessible to you. It is my honor to stand next to you in the ranks. I'm proud of you, cherish you, and will do everything in my power, and even more to make it easier for you to fight. Does that mean another mutiny? Please, Popov, please do it. And anyways, you guys get it. He's complaining. He's complained. He said the truth, and he got removed. And obviously, as this title mentions, the Russian command ignores reality and failure at all costs. So it's actually advantageous to Ukraine that they have Gerasimov and Shoigu, some of the most incompetent military commanders in the history of humankind, to be still leaders of the Russian military. It's only helping Ukraine achieve a quicker victory because these people don't know what they're doing, and they're afraid of hearing the truth. They're afraid of also pushing these news to Putin, right? And Putin doesn't want to hear about the failures, right? So yet again, I come with you with today's video with a lot of insight. I hope you guys enjoy my content. If you do, please subscribe to my channel. Leave me a like, leave me a comment about what you think about this general's comments. And yeah, thank you again for your support. I really, really appreciate it. It really motivates me to make more videos. And let's work together for Ukraine to have a quick, or I should say, a victory soon, because it's not going to be quick. We've seen how big the Russian army is, but really, really, really thankful. And so I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you and take care.